Okie dokie, let's start. So we're talking start making sense. I'm Alastair Somerville, and if you ever need to get hold of me, I am much easiest to find on Twitter, which is my Twitter address there. So what I do, I work in sensory design, which is a relatively obscure area in a sense that it's an edge on to accessibility, but in a rather strange area. I work in trying to make information meaningful, in that I work in an area where what I want to do is discover how users sense information and then translate or adjust the information that I'm given to their needs. So a lot of my work is taking visual information and then translating it to tactile, or taking incredibly complex textual information and converting it to graphics or to audio. And so it creates a lot of problems. I mean, one of my biggest problems is I spend a lot of time working and making stuff which is then cast into steel. So if you've ever designed a UI, I have UIs out there which will be still in existence when I'm retired or dead, because they're lasting 25 years. And so, for example, last year I was doing the Imperial War Museum, where they have a new World War I gallery, and they needed a map for people with visual impairments to be able to show where things were, what the journey was through the building, which is fine. So I designed a map, which is, and you can go and visit it, which is there, but it works for people with visual impairment. But simultaneously, the map is actually doing another thing, which is not really noticed by a lot of people. The map is also a map of where the quiet places are in the gallery. Because the problem with the exhibition, it's a very tight space. It's a very, very hard space for noise. So we were aware that for people with sensory processing difficulties, there would be a lot of problems, a lot of panic. So we actually designed to show where the seats were, where to escape the exhibition. So this is designing for different sensory needs. Where it crosses over with digital is, of course, that what I view as sensory design is also now what a lot of people view as being post-screen interaction. The possibility of designing multimodal interfaces which are spread across the body or spread across the place. So wearables, the Internet of Things, where there are sensors, there are screens, there are things which are beyond screens everywhere. And what I'm going to try and talk to you about today is some of the possible issues that you're going to discover when trying to design for this. And I'm going to talk about it in these terms. I'm going to talk to you about sensors, which is sort of fundamental area for me. The importance of adaption, how we as humans adapt to context, to content all the time. And to bring it back to digital, how important personalisation is in the future. I'm also going to be conning you. There will be a trick in this. About 2/3 of the way through, I'm going to tell you something which is a trick, which is a con. I apologize. Fundamentally, what I'm going to talk about now is embodied cognition. How many people know embodied cognition-ish? Good, that means I won't be corrected. Neuroscientists, you really don't want to get on the wrong side of them. Embodied cognition matters nowadays because you're not talking about just a person and a screen. You're talking about the whole person moving through space, moving through time. And so the ideas of embodied cognition become really, really important. And embodied cognition's got fundamentally two things going on with it. One, that your brain is not separate from your body. The body and the brain actually completely match each other. The brain considers itself to be the body, and it holds a model of itself. So it is reflecting permanently what's going on. Secondarily, the other thing which is really important is to understand that you don't just think with your brain. You think with your whole body. You have neurons, you have brain material spread through the whole of your body. So the actual way in which you move, the actual way in which you sit, affect your ability to think, your ability to remember, the ability to do stuff, which creates some slightly odd effects, which are really interesting, but they're really odd. So, deep down, we sense, we act, cellular level. We sense, we take meaning, we act. Again, a fairly easy thing. But we have 5 senses, and that makes things slightly more complex. Which of the senses is important? And that's why we have emotions. Emotions exist to coat certain experiences so that you actually act upon them faster. They exist to actually exaggerate a sensory input so you act faster. But even that's not enough. Sorry. You have many senses. You have, I mean, we generally work with 9 senses as being the idea. You have many senses. There's too many senses. There's too many emotions. And what that means is you end up having to have consciousness. Consciousness is a trick on you. It is a way in which emotions surface it. It's a way in which you can actually make decisions. That. It's an interesting issue. So we sense context and content. We adapt. We adapt through emotions, there, and we adapt through consciousness. And this is how we're adapting to complexity of content and all the stuff around us. So what do? What does it matter to you? You support the whole of this embodiment through personalization. Through the ways in which you enable personalization through the web, you actually support the whole thing. And I'm going to give you a couple of ways of how. One, you need to understand sensory mapping. One of the fundamental issues is a lot of people think that senses are a spectrum. They're not. They're an axis. You're balanced between your consciousness and your unconscious desire to sense or to avoid sensory experiences. This is one of the things. You want to pay attention, but parts of you don't want to pay attention. And when you're playing tricks with attention, the attention economy and all that, you have to understand that people are balancing in this way between things they think they're doing and things they don't know they're doing. And this creates problems, but actually there are ways of discovering this. We do have questionnaires. There are, coming out of occupational therapy, ways of discovering how to discover what the user, their biases are. So there are ways of thinking about this. Sensory framing. Again, you need to give a framework for people to be able to adjust the experience to their sensory capacity. So you're supporting embodiment through the personalization. Again, a framework of personalization. And this is where the con is. When I talk about personalization, when I talk about these things, it all sounds terribly difficult, as though you're going to have to do something new. And yet, you don't. Because personalization already exists. The whole framework's out there. It's accessibility. The accessibility framework, which is already existing in web design, is personalization. It is sensory design. It's really difficult to spot. So, I mean, this is IBM. IBM talk about hyper-personalization. They talk about this in those terms. That's the W3C headings for accessibility, and I have to say it is very clear that nobody would spot that that's about sensory design or personalization. However, if you look at the iOS accessibility features, this is iOS 8, I think actually iOS 9 does change the heading slightly, you can see that this is about adjusting the device, adjusting the experience to the personal sensory needs of the individual. This is personalization. Accessibility is personalization. So, to come back to the hows, understand that people are all living, swaying slightly between conscious and unconscious desire to experience sensory things. Understand that you can enable user personalization, use a framework, use a map. And finally, you can do something else. You can use this to do this. You can enable diversity. You see, diversity is normal. Neurodiversity, racial diversity, sexual diversity, all of these things, there's normal. And actually, you have the ability to do it. You can broaden experiences, you can deepen experiences, and you can enrich lives. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm Cortes. I'm a creative strategist at Unit 9X User Experience and User Interface Designer. And for the past year, I've been working on projects and pitch and new business proposals for virtual reality. And I've been involved in both brand projects and internal research projects. And today I'm here to talk to you about some of our learnings that we came across during this past year when designing for this new medium, virtual reality. So I have a question. Who here has tried a VR headset? Cool, yeah. So hopefully you guys resonate to what I will be talking about, and for the ones who haven't, I highly recommend you to go on and try Oculus Rift or Samsung Gear VR. So what is VR? That is the first question. Before I introduce the learnings, we need to give some context into what this new medium is. It is a world that wraps around your eyes and your field of view, and is a 360 environment. So it is something that goes all around you, and it hopefully immerses you so much that tricks your brain into believing that what you're experiencing is actually real. It takes you to places and it puts you in situations that you wouldn't expect to be. And if the experience is actually done in a good way, it creates environments and feels that you couldn't live in your real world. So what you see behind me is an experience that was done where they placed a pornographic movie on a VR headset and then they gave it to people to try it. And some of the reactions you see are quite scary. People are quite disgust of what they're seeing in front of them, and they even take the headset off. So things like this prove that it is quite powerful. It does create emotions and sensations that you can live otherwise without this new medium. And it also takes you to places, either they can be fictional or real, but it removes you from where you are, the moment where you are and what you're living right now, and it places you somewhere else in another dimensity. So now we understood what is VR, but what kind of experience can we actually build? Because this is all very brand new and people don't know yet what type of content we can produce. So at Unit 9, we were able to identify 3 main experiences. One being hyper-immersive emotional, like the pornographic movie you saw. It's an experience where, like, for example, 5GUM, we did a branded experience where we placed a user with a headset on a massive container hanging from the air, like this, and we blown scented air to their faces, and the whole idea was to put them in 4 different fictional worlds that related to the 4 flavors of the gum. So 5GUM is a gum. And the outcomes of this were quite amazing. People were actually engaged and they felt like they were living that world, that abstract world. This was completely abstract. There was no relation to the real world. And they were quite immersive and interacting with it. Second type of experience is point of view documentary live action. This is quite self-explanatory, so if you would like to go and visit British Columbia, but you've never been there, you can watch movies, you can take your friends' words for granted, but what if you can actually put a headset on and be in the middle of a lake, listening to the birds, the water, the boat, and hopefully get a sense of what it is to be in the middle of British Columbia. And finally, we identified a third category, which are games. At Unit 9, we haven't really done a lot of games. Brands are still very scary of investing money in VR, especially for games. But Blaze Rush is a good example of another company doing this. They did a version for VR. And one thing that is quite interesting is that they did what it's not a very common approach, which is a third point of view perspective. So you're not actually riding the car, you're sitting away from it, like a God's point of view, and looking at the track and racing the cars like that. So once we understand what kind of experiences we can do, we go on and identify what is the technology available. So far, we have these main 3 VR headsets available in the market: Samsung Gear VR, Oculus Rift, and Google Cardboard. And since Oculus was bought by Facebook, we've noticed that there's a lot more people and brands investing money in creating VR headsets, like HC. They created a new one like a few months ago. However, we identified, and I think a lot of people who have been working with virtual reality can say the exactly same thing, is that haptic feedback is lacking. It's impossible to actually bring someone into the virtual world if all your body, except your head, is still in this world. So none of the things that touch you, you can actually feel it, if it's cold, if it's warm, if you're wet, if you're dried. So all the experiences we can do are quite static. They're quite laid back type of experiences where you sit back and you watch whatever is happening in front of you. We tested the British Columbia experience last time I gave this talk in a conference, and most people were just standing like this. And I had to go there and tell them, walk around, move around, go like this, because people didn't really understand what they had to do. So having this into consideration and understanding all the constraints that we face, we were able to outline a series of rules, I would say, or guidelines. They were also based on Oculus Rift guidelines, and I am going to run a little bit through it. So the first one comes directly from game design. It's binaural sound. So binaural sound is what we can describe as 3D sound. It is very important that sound replicates what happens in the real world. So if we're trying to put someone in the middle of a forest, sound bounces off things. Sound bounces off the floor, sound bounces off trees, leaves. If it's rain, it falls all over you. So 3D sound design, it's very, very important to be considered. This one is different from game design. So whoever has worked with game design, the HUD approach doesn't work for virtual reality. We cannot ask from a user to consider a 2D graphic environment as well as a 3D world around them. So every type of UI, text, buttons, call to actions, little indications of where to go, they need to be placed in the 3D environment, and they need to be scalable, and they need to have a perspective depending where they are on the 3D. Another thing different from game design are avatars. So avatars are not very important when it comes to first-person point of view type of game. You don't need to have an avatar to be immersed in the game. But in virtual reality, it's quite different. So if you look down and you don't see a body, you see just emptiness, you feel like, okay, I'm actually not in this world, I don't belong here, where's my body? But if you do have a body, then the problem becomes that, does that body look like your own body? Am I a robot? Am I a male? Am I a female? Is the body actually the same size as me? Do I feel like my legs are too short, too tall? So if we do include avatars in the experience, they need to be considered very carefully, and they need to resonate with the type of world you're building. Another learning is using controllers. So again, this is different from game design outside of virtual reality. Game design, when you're playing a game, you can see what you're controlling. You can see what you're holding, if it's a keyboard, a mouse, a joystick, whatever. But if you're wearing a headset, you can't really see whatever you're holding. So controllers need to be built and used for blind mode. So you can't have people interacting with a keyboard or a mouse. Another thing different from game design is content. So in VR, like I said before, content is 360. It's all around you. So you need to consider every single little pixel that it's displayed. If you don't have a sky and the user looks up and there's just a black, shade, it's quite, it breaks the immersion. It removes the person outside of from the experience you're trying to immerse them in. Animation. So this learning comes directly from real life, what we call IRL, in real life interaction, and it is what makes people believe that they are in a real world. You know, the world around us has motion, it moves, it creates blurriness if you turn your head very fast. So all the animation and visual effects that are applied, if you're trying to replicate what goes on in this world, need to be as close as possible to that. Movement, again, from real life. When you grab your phone, you control it. So I grab my phone, and I'm the one controlling the movement that I'm doing and the speed that the phone is moving. So every type of movement and interaction needs to be controlled directly by the user. You cannot have zoom-ins and zoom-outs automatically done for the user, because it will create motion sickness, it will create people getting dizzy and actually wanting to stop to experience what you're doing. And finally, latency. This is a big, big issue. What you see here is an experiment done by a Swedish team where they placed 2 VR headsets on a guy and a girl. They were playing ping pong. What they were seeing was what actually is in front of them. However, the latency made them completely miss the ball when they were trying to hit it. And then finally, test. You know, this goes across to all disciplines in our industry, digital. We need to test. You can't expect that the experience you're building actually works. So in this case, these guys actually decided to test it, asked the security guard to try it on, and he was so into it. He felt it was so real that whatever was going on, it was probably like a roller coaster or something, but he fell out of the chair because he couldn't hold it. So as you can see, there's a lot more do's than don'ts. We don't have answers for everything. It's a lot of trying and failing, but we do understand something. Do not place someone in a virtual world without telling them what to do or where to go. People won't understand it. If it is an experimental, emotional, artistic project, yes, it can work. It's more for the experiential part of it. But if it actually tries to communicate a message, if it tries to sell a product, if it's for a brand like 5Gum, you really need to have good indicators for users. So those are slow and progressive familiarization. Don't drop users and suddenly tell them, run there. They won't know how to do it. Slowly walk them through, start the animation, and everything needs to be very, very progressive. Visual clues are very important, so things like arrows pointing, go here, or sounds, or like indicators on the floor where to move next, and guidance and help. The good thing is that with all the technology available today, things are moving quite fast. At Unit 9, we're experimenting with a lot of new gadgets like sensorial gloves or perspiration trackers, heartbeat trackers. So things like heartbeat, gaze, geolocation, head motion, perspiration, and even brain activity, we really believe they will be plugged into VR headsets in the future. And whatever experience we're building will be completely personalized to the user. So if your heartbeat is racing, we will understand that you might want something more slowing down. Or if you're bored, we can fast the experience and make it the adrenaline pump up. And to finalize, it's a great time to be creative and user experience. We have now the chance to create a new grammar. A lot of words and meanings that weren't part of the digital world before, like gaze and run, and like things that come from games, of course, but are new to this new VR world. We have the chance to build this new grammar. Thank you.
Hi. Is this thing on? Yeah, we're good. Hi, yeah, I'm Yoav Weiss. I work for Akamai, and I'm here to talk about responsive images and web standards in general. So once upon a time, there was a mobile web. We had mobile websites served to mobile-specific browsers over mobile phones. It was as sad as it looks. Not that many people use it. Should have went with the other clicker. Okay. And eventually, the iPhone came out and broke this barrier. All of a sudden, desktop websites were working on mobile browsers. And the result of that was that people started making iPhone-specific websites. I'll stay here. But that wasn't scalable. That was something that with the myriad of devices that followed just wasn't working. And eventually, we got responsive web design figured out, which was based on media queries, fluid grids, and flexible images. The flexible images part was optimistically defined. The spirit was that that's an easy problem. We just need to send the largest possible image and let the browser resize it. That's yes, please. And we considered it a job well done. We were pretty happy about ourselves. But pretty soon, we realized that, thanks, that it's not working as well as we thought it was. Responsive websites were bloated websites. Most of these resources that we were serving to various devices were the same resources across all form factors. Most of these resources were images. And a lot of data could have been saved if we adapted the images to the device. So the result was data plan abuse. We were abusing our users' data plan, abusing their pockets, and wasting their time. Developers gather around from all over the internet, demanding a solution, turned to the various standard mailing lists, and started proposing various proposals. And eventually, the Responsive Images community group was formed to resolve this issue. After a couple of months of discussions, the community group came out with a picture proposal to resolve that problem. At the same time, on the WhatWG mailing list, an Apple engineer came with a seemingly competing proposal of extending the image element to include the source set attribute. That proposal was added to the HTML spec over the weekend without much public discussion. The developer community was not pleased by that. And a lot of mailing list flame wars ensued. And for a short while, we had the picture versus source set situation. We had two competing proposals that were fighting against each other on the same ground. But shortly after that, we realized that picture and source set are two complementary proposals that can coexist, and each one of them resolves different use cases, resolves different needs by the developers. Browsers weren't convinced by that, and for a long while, nothing happened on that front in terms of browser implementation, until we were able to get some browser engineers involved and come up with proposals of their own. There was the source end proposal, which was quickly rejected, but triggered a lot of proposals now from browser folks, now from people working on the browser, and proposing, basically rehashing the discussion that we had in the community a year and a half earlier. And eventually, we got back to a simplified form of picture and an extended form of source set as the eventual solution. Mozilla were positive about that approach. Blink, the rendering engine behind Chrome, was less enthusiastic about it due to implementation concerns and missing infrastructure. I started working on that infrastructure in order to convince the project that it can be done. And eventually crowdfunded part of that effort before I was Akamai. That was when I was still independent. And eventually landed patches, and the whole feature shipped in Chrome 38 about a year ago. Also shipped in Firefox, and now being worked on in IE, and parts of it are shipped in Safari. And this was a group effort of various individuals from the web developer community, web designers, browser folks, standard folks, all gathered together to resolve this issue. And it was heralded as the new way of doing web standards. So great success. But what do we do next? How do we replicate that model to continue to evolve the way web standards are made? First, the question, why change? And in my view, there are two major problems with the way web standards have been done up until now. The theoretical model behind that way is that web developers encounter a problem. They go out to the mailing list of the relevant working group, specify that problem, specify the use cases that they can't resolve, and then the working group members specify a solution, browser vendors implement that solution, and eventually we have a feature that is working and resolves the user's problems. The problem is that more often than not, the result is that users are using the feature in ways that the implementers haven't predicted. That the solution that we have in place doesn't resolve what developers actually need. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that, in my view, the web is in trouble. The web is a wonderful platform full of human knowledge, supporting the world's economy. It has billions of users, millions of developers, but only hundreds of browser implementers, which means that browser people are extremely busy, and they're resolving the problems that they see before them, the problems that they consider important, which are not necessarily the problems that developers are considering important. And in my view, we have on our hands, we're heading towards a tragedy of the commons. We're heading towards a situation where everyone are using this platform and no one is chipping in, or very few people are actually working on it. And the solution to both these problems is basically to get more developers involved, move people from the millions group to the hundreds group, get the developers involved in the feature creation process rather than just the use cases at the beginning, and get feedback all along the way. The problem with that approach is that getting involved in web standards can be overwhelming. There are a lot of groups, a lot of mailing lists. Mailing lists themselves are very hostile to navigate through. And the web standard community wasn't always known to be very welcoming towards new people. So in order to resolve that, we created the WICG, the Web Platform Incubator Community Group. It's a new community group whose purpose is to help developers get involved in web standards, provide a friendly forum to incubate new proposals, to discuss, to come up with new ideas, to bring their needs, and help these ideas get developed, and then move them over to the relevant working group, to the relevant standard bodies that will standardize that effort. So I'm out of time, but in short, the web is ours. It's on us to maintain the web. It's on us to make sure that it gets evolved in the way that we need it to be in our day-to-day work. So join the community group, follow us on Twitter, and join our, start discussions on our discourse instance, and just get involved. Thank you.